Hello everyone, I'm Jake Roos from Toitū Envirocare. Welcome to our public sector webinar series, the latest edition. The topic of this one is cutting carbon with NABERS-NZ. So we've got three speakers joining myself during the session. Satish Bana and Nathan Herbert from Argosy Property Limited and Danielle Kennedy from Panuku. So we're going to use the case study of 82 Wyndham Street to talk about NABERS-NZ, and then we're going to go into a panel discussion about how we can cut carbon from our buildings. Now, Argosy is a carbon zero certified client of ours, and Panuku is a carbon reduced client as well. So keeping it in the family. So for those of you that haven't heard about NABERS-NZ or wondering a little bit about it, it actually stands for the National Australian Building Energy Rating Scheme New Zealand, which is funny, but it's a good name that was catchy. So they just imported the scheme wholesale, including the A. It's a in-use and annual energy performance rating scale. Unlike Green Star, which projects the sustainable qualities of a building based on its plans and at the point of construction, post-construction, it is a performance measure actually in use. It's administered by the New Zealand Green Building Council for ECA, who own the scheme, and it's just for office space. And that's to do with the fact that office space is generic enough that comparisons around the country are possible, whereas with other building types, it's much more difficult to arrive at a sensible benchmarking system because of all those differences. So 3 stars in the scheme comes out at roughly the New Zealand average for office building energy performance. It's unlike Green Star, it doesn't require massive amounts of data to calculate, just the energy used by the building, its lettable floor area, and the number of workstations. The rating has to be completed by an accredited assessor, and the assessor provides a little bit of direction about how the energy rating can be improved. Now, why are we talking about NABERS now? It's been around for many years. Well, it's because it is now a requirement for 64 departments, ministries, and other types of government agencies under the Carbon Neutral Government Program. All new leases over 2,000 square metres must have a NABERS-NZ rating now. The target for office buildings occupied by government is 5 stars with a minimum of 4 stars. And the target for new builds occupied by government is 5 stars. So we're looking at quite high levels of energy performance. So also, the reason we're looking at 82 Wyndham Street is not just because it is a NABERS rated building, but it was also occupied by a public sector agency, Panuku Development Auckland. And it's also a building that has a carbon neutral building certification. So this is a trial that we carried out in partnership with the New Zealand Green Building Council. And basically, we measured already the building had excellent energy performance as evidenced by its Green Star rating and its NABERS rating, so the emissions had been reduced. And then the remaining emissions were offset. So those were the emissions from electricity, solid waste, wastewater, and a tiny amount of diesel, probably for a backup generator, but someone else could confirm that. Now, just one important thing to clarify about a carbon neutral building is that the offsets used to make it carbon neutral don't automatically feed through to the tenant's inventory and make their carbon footprint smaller, because the rules around offsetting is that you can't have a partial offset. It's either all or nothing. You're carbon neutral or you're not carbon neutral. However, having said that, because the building has been offset, if the tenants decided to become carbon neutral, they wouldn't have to offset that part. It had already been done. So basically, no partial offsets, no double offsets. Actually, because Argosy Property Limited was carbon neutral, that exact rule, no double offsets, came into effect And the additional number of offsets we needed to make the building carbon neutral was actually relatively small because Argosy had already done the lion's share. So now I'm going to hand over to Argosy Property Limited. We have two guests, Satish Bana, Head of Sustainability at Argosy, and also Nathan Herbert, who is one of their chief engineers. And they've got the in-depth knowledge of energy conservation measures employed in that building. So over to you.
Hi, I'm going to start on 82 Woodland Street, just giving you the overview of the case study for this building. Now, Argosy has been quite open about the fact that we only do built ratings rather than design ratings. So what we actually build is what we actually certify and rate. In this case, this building was a 20-year-old developed quality building. It had short lease tenure in it. And what we decided to do was, instead of demolishing, we decided to refurbish the existing building and go right back to the concrete structure and replace all the services. We gave it a seismic upgrade at the same time, and we also introduced an infrastructure facility as well as increasing the amenities in the building in regard to making it comply to current building code for accessible access and toilets, etc. So when we did this, because we reused the facade, we prevented about 1,000 square metres of glass being removed and going to landfill, and we also prevented the removal of about 3.5 tonnes of concrete, 3.523 of concrete being sent to Hartfield. This building, because there was a lot of vacant space and it was Green Star, it was targeting a high Green Star rating, it gave a point of difference in the market, and also with our history, we were targeting a high energy efficiency rating as well. And that is the building. It's got a VRF air conditioning system. It's got high fresh air rates and a few other bells and whistles with intelligent LEDs, etc.
So part of our specification for the building, part of our goals, were the star ratings for Green Star and NABERS. We targeted 4-star built rating in Green Star and 4-star NABERS-NZ. So part of achieving that NABERS rating, or aiming for it, was to install a thorough network of sub-utility metering, which is seriously extensive in this building. You need sub-metering on all of the floors, all of the mechanical plant and common area, so you can separate those. Base build NABERS rating, which we were going for, rates common area, lighting and power, and base build mechanical, which is the main air conditioning plant of the building, the lifts, and any other major electricity draws there, and it excludes any tenant consumption, which goes on a NABERS-NZ tenant rating. So the only way to do that is that sub-metering. We went a bit further with our sub-utility metering and actually installed 64 sub-utility meters for a 4 or 5 tenant building, which is that's allowed us to really drill down on the areas where we might be able to tweak our efficiency, just see, have a better picture of how we're using energy, and basically plan to trim it from there, which we did. And after our 12-month rating period, we achieved a 5-star NABERS-NZ base build rating, which we're very proud of. And since then, our most recent NABERS rating has been 5.5 stars, which we're very happy about. To be able to achieve that on a 20-year-old building is something quite special. So part of going for this, it wasn't just Argosy that designed this system. We had a team that worked with us through this project, and I think Satish might be able to speak a bit on that.
Yeah, so what we did was we had a really involved client as well, Boston and Panuku, and having your clients and the occupants on board in the process does improve the outcomes. And Botham Municipal were really big on wanting some environmental credentials on this building, as well for Panuku. So that allowed us to really push our rating. So what we did was we designed the building, we ran the rating system over it. We didn't go and cherry pick a rating system and then try and get a rating. What we did was we ran the project as we wanted it, which was really focused around a long-term approach to the building, because we're an investment company. And also it's about having the right product for our clients and providing what we told them we would provide. So we actually do go a bit beyond the developer mentality, because we are taking a long-term approach. This allowed us to, the original project goals for energy reduction was only around the 10-15% mark, and we actually increased this with our existing clients to 20%. And like we said, we targeted the 4 and 5 and ended up with 5 and 5, and then now we're 5 and 5.5. When this building, after year 1, it was the only building in New Zealand to have a 5-star green rating, as well as 5-star NABERS base build rating. It had a 5-star whole build rating, and Panuku also had a rating as well of over 4 stars for a tenancy rating. So it goes to show that if everyone's working together, you can achieve it. But the biggest benefit was we reduced our energy in the building and in the running of the building with our clients. Going on to the next slide there, that there is our case study of why we did it, and there's actually a monetary benefit of doing it, but there's also a social and environmental responsibility there. And one of the things we've said at Argosy is we lead environmentally from the top down in our organisation. So we started it from the CEO down to senior leadership team, and then the guys in the property management team pick it up as well. So sustainability is embedded in the organisation. In here we show you the pre-green benefits. So it was a standard VRF building with T5 lights and just your typical 1 disabled shower, toilet on each floor, 1 shower per floor. Then after we finished the project, we've actually got a heat recovery smart VRV ducted system. We increased the fresh air up to 200%. We've got our intelligent LED lighting with daylight occupancy. We've got a large EOT facility, which is the envy of other building users. And that was a very big draw card for Boston and Panuku for this building and for Foster Moore. And then targeting some independent verification through rating systems like NABERS and Green Star gives the occupants a bit of assurance that we are doing what we said we were doing, and it is independently verified by a third party. But you'll see in this that we had a large valuation uplift as well for the project. So not only is it sustainable, but it makes financial sense. Next slide, please.
This is basically reflects on what we've just been talking about in a nice colourful picture. The first section, you can see the energy consumption of the electricity consumption of the 4 floors in the building pre-project, and then there's the consumption post-project. Few things there. In post-project, you can see the spike, the downward spike from COVID occupation. But more interestingly, what you can see is a smoother pattern there. The air conditioning doesn't put load on and then take it right off. So not only is this a more efficient system consumption-wise, but it's better on our plant and equipment. It lasts longer, lower maintenance costs, and all of which result in these great ratings but I think that's a self-explanatory chart, that one. And we have a couple of slides just of to show you our interior there. That's the lobby at 82 Wyndham Street. It went from a 20-year-old dated space to seriously up to the minute, reflected by our end of trip facilities as well.
The building was a very rudimentary building originally, and it was very stark and personal. It was very, off the time, it was very clean lines, bland. The foyer had 12 shades of grey in it, which looked like a Tetris cube gone wrong. Ignite did a great job in putting a Scandinavian timber theme through the building, which you can see there. And we've gone to very natural stone, timber, and we've gone for not a green wall, but we've gone for an organic moss wall, and we've also used an organic plaster render there rather than just a plain paint finish or a tile, just to soften up the area. This theme goes through the whole building, and it goes through our end of trip as well.
In line with the Green Star built rating, all of the paint finishes in the building are low VOC, and timbers stamp sustainable sources.
Okay, next slide.
So that's a basic overview of our building. Obviously, we've got the NABERS-NZ rating and Green Star, but what those have now helped us achieve is the carbon zero base build operations rating for the building, New Zealand's first. What went into that rating was quantifying our energy consumption. It goes a little bit further than a NABERS base build rating does, but basically that's our electricity consumption, our diesel fuel, which was touched on earlier. That's from a diesel backup generator, which is that's a building amenity. 5 litres of fuel, I think we used in 1 year. But to achieve the carbon zero rating, we then offset with New Zealand carbon credits and gold standard offshore. We took up New Zealand's last three forest-based credits actually for this project. We're very proud of it. Just a couple of slides, a few slides after this. In order to follow and to track our energy consumption, while we do have specialist building services consultants who conduct the NABERS rating for us, here at Argosy, we use a energy metering system called Casar, and that shows, or the way we've designed it for the building, is a dashboard showing whole build energy. The next slide shows base build energy, and then the next slide, tenancy energy. Now on the bottom left, you can see what we call the heat map. That while there's red for tenant, for example, the great thing about that is that it shows the load is constant through the day, which reflects that the smooth line on the graph shown earlier, meaning there's no sort of unnatural loads on the equipment, which is going to cause failures. There's no particularly high demand on it. That's great for efficiency and for longevity. This is just, we really like this dashboard system. It's a quick peek, a lot of people can understand it, and it allows us to tailor exactly what sort of visuals we would like for this. And then there's a shot from Lower Nelson Street of our building. It's an interesting building. We don't own the roof, we don't own the basement, and it's connected to a heritage building. So it's there have certainly been challenges in managing the the upgrade of the building, and then energy management inclusive. But yeah, all in all, we're very proud of it, and particularly proud of our ratings.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Satish and Nathan. Now I'm going to hand over to Danielle Kennedy, who is Principal Advisor Corporate Responsibility at Iki Panuku Development, Auckland. Danielle provides guidance on sustainability and climate change across Iki Panuku, town and centre and urban regeneration portfolio, and design and project management functions. So over to you, Danielle. I'll just say next slide when you want it.
Kia ora koutou, ko Danielle Kennedy toku ingoa. So I'm just going to go through a bit about how we found things as a tenant. So Iki Panuku, for those of you that aren't aware, we formed in 2015 and we're an Auckland Council controlled organisation involved in development and regeneration of town centres, and we work in about 10 locations over Auckland, and we are involved in managing property portfolio, and also acquiring and disposing of assets that are no longer needed. Slide, thanks. So when I talk about reducing our carbon footprint, there's kind of 4 areas that we work across the business. In our development locations is where we have the chance to make the biggest impact, and we have minimum standards in those communities. So for the developments we create for commercial, it's 5-star Green Star ratings, and also 6 Home Star ratings when we're building residential or requiring that in development agreements for our new areas. Organisation-wide, so that's things like our sustainable procurement across the workplace. So that's about our offices, in particular 82 Wyndham, about the activities we carry out there, and also around the staff and the lifestyle changes that people can make, including commuting to work. Slide, thanks. So you've heard a lot about the office already. So we moved in around 2016 post a merger of 2 other council organisations, and we're looking for suitable premise to fit the number of people we had, and also with green credentials. We really wanted to be walking the talk around. We're working in our communities towards sustainable futures and outcomes, then we need to be doing that as an organisation as well. And so we did a Green Star interior fit out prior to moving in, or as we're moving in, and then also we have we started off with a NABERS rating for tenancy of 4-star, and we've moved up to 5-star, hoping for 5.5 in the next audit. See how we go. So a little bit about our carbon footprint as well. So we have, as mentioned earlier, a Toitū carbon reduced certification, which we embarked on our first baseline audit in 2019. Since then, we've reduced our carbon footprint by 9%, and we're currently at 813 tonnes. So the actual building operations for 82 Wyndham for our main offices is actually a small proportion of that. It's only around 2%. But that's after all of these great improvements in the building that we're working with. We don't have the measure from beforehand because we weren't actually measuring our total carbon footprint then. But we've got other buildings and operations that come into our footprint, including marina management as well. So while it's small, it's still really incredibly important. And just to mention about the offsets from earlier as well, we are currently not using offsets. At the moment, we've got a target to reduce our emissions by 35% by 2030, and we have a plan that's required by our reduced certification and actions that we're undertaking on an annual basis. Slide, please. So I just thought I'd go through just a couple of the aspects of kind of being a sustainable tenant and how that's related to the building that we're in. Having the NABERS rating for the base build and also for our tenancy means that there's default settings in place. So we're not having to ask huge amounts of tenants around, of staff, sorry, to make changes. There's still small things that people can do, but having those things locked in means that we are reducing our energy consumption in a smart way, I guess, in a way that means that we're not churning out too much staff time. We also have default settings on devices in terms of sleep modes on meeting room screens and the parts of the building that we're responsible for. And we've recently done an energy audit as well to try and we've really covered all the low-hanging fruit. We're going to go for a bit of the high-hanging fruit and see what we can do in terms of some of our noticed a few of the hot water sensor settings and maybe some of the sensor grids that we might be able to adjust. So one of the things as being a tenant and you've got the box of the building that you're working in is a few of the settings. Originally there was automatic blinds in the building. They're now manual. So that staff get to be able to have control over adjusting those. And it was originally envisioned that the cleaners would take control over those as well if they're not automated. But we have found that that's not happening at the moment. So we're going to be doing some work in that area between staff and the cleaners to make sure that people have enough control over their workspace for comfort, but we're still getting the efficiency gains rather than losing people.
May I please put something in there? With regards to the blinds, that was an interesting lesson on Argosy's behalf. We installed automatic blinds in order to reduce the solar gain or the heat load in the building, and as such the energy load on air conditioning. But what it turned out is that people don't like a blind closing on them in the middle of the day when they're looking out the window. And it's as plain as that, and giving the tenant back some control of that has proved beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. We also run some staff engagement activities linking energy use in the office to what they're doing at home as well. So there's a connection there across how people live day to day at home and at work. And just around balancing or having consistent policies around the occupancy. So work from home is now a big thing. So making sure you've got policies in place like hot desking and right sizing the office space so that you have the right level of occupancy. So reduced occupancy can be good because it's reduced consumption, but then there's always the sweet spot of not having an empty building that is running as well. And just a tip, I think, so I've come in late in the piece, I wasn't involved in the original setup of the building, and some of the benefits or I guess cream on the top can be lost in handover from over the years, handover of building or over staff changes over the time you're in the building. So I think it's really good to regularly engage and meet and keep up to date, find ways to communicate with the tenants, like the dashboard that you showed. We're looking at potentially showing that in the foyer and that kind of thing, just to keep people aware of what's going on. Slide, please. And then just wanted to touch on a couple of other areas, not energy specific, but that still relate to our carbon footprint. So we've got office waste recycling, which is pretty standard now. We have worked more recently with Argosy around composting service, so removal of green waste on contract. So as a tenant, we started doing that, and maybe one other tenant was doing it. Now we're looking at doing it for the whole building. We do annual waste audits to check what areas we can improve on. We're trialling new connections. Argosy is offering not a regular one-off kind of e-waste collections that we can use. And we're looking at, we've actually introduced trialling of TerraCycle office stationery recycling as well. And then looking at not just the waste of what we have to deal with once it's already there, but our sustainable procurement practices and supporting staff through lunchbox libraries and keep cups so that they can reduce the amount of waste that's brought into the office that we then have to deal with. And some key things in doing that is making sure staff are regularly engaged, and we host plastic-free July events and that kind of thing. And the big tip here for waste is to make sure you work with your office manager and your cleaners. They will be the ones that are making or breaking it. Slide, please. And travel. So yeah, part of the fit out was the building refurb was the end of trip facilities, which are fantastic. So we've got towels and showers and lockers and ironing boards and various other things that make it really, really amazing for people to be able to ride to work or even walk the last trip or e-scooter the last trip that they might want to shower or to refresh. And that can be a huge barrier to people commuting to work that way. Yeah, I just can't rate that enough. E-bikes we have in our fleet, and a barrier to that is that we need to have good staff training around that so people feel confident. We've got e-cars coming, EVs in our fleet renewal with council in the coming year. And we do an annual staff travel survey, so we find out how people are commuting for our scope 3 emissions, and also supporting them to use other forms of transport for work meetings, whether or not it's so great that we can Skype and use Teams a lot more now, but when you have to be in person, can you just jump on the bus or take one of the fleet e-bikes? And also engaging that people in that, so it's not seen as a niche activity. We have the Auckland Bike Challenge that we encourage staff to participate. We've come first or second in the last couple of years for our category. So there's a real groundswell within the staff of it's a really fun, cool thing to do. And we recently had a lights on bikes because it's getting dark. So we had some giveaways in conjunction with Auckland Transport around making sure people have their high-vis available and that kind of thing. Yeah, and my tip for this one is that the social norms of what is okay, acceptable, cool, is really, really key. None of this bike rage at our office, and confidence, staff confidence, and being able to even hop in and drive a fleet vehicle if it's an EV if they've never had before. And finally, last slide. So we do a lot of work around staff engagement. We think it's really critical. It's, you know, the base building, the ratings are excellent. I guess 101 to have. I think they're really like that should be the minimum. And then we work with people in our organisation to make sure that we have the best outcomes in terms of our carbon footprint. We have a sustainability champions group with Ngātoa Manaaki, and that's regularly attended, and staff get the opportunity to put forward projects. And we're just embarking on launching FutureFit, which is a great online carbon footprint tool for individuals, and we run team challenges and things through the corporate package that's offered. So we're looking forward to doing that next month. So bit of a ramble from me, but we really highly recommend the NABERS rating from the base building, but also from a tenancy perspective. We really highly recommend working with a great landlord that is going to be supportive of what your goals are or your requirements are, and meeting regularly and really fostering that relationship. So that's all from me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Danielle and Nathan and Satish. So now we're going into the panel discussion section. So we've had a few questions come through on chat, and my colleague Kenzie is going to help us out with those questions, fielding them from the floor and feeding them to the four of us. Now, just to be clear, the questions don't have to be about neighbours. We're talking about cutting carbon from buildings, and that would be by any method. Including those things not related to energy, such as waste and staff commuting that Danielle has touched on. So we're ready when you are, Kenzie.
Cool. So the first question is from an anonymous attendee. So they say, what initiative contributed the most to your neighbours score? Probably for Pinocchio and Argosy.
Yeah, the low-hanging fruit's the VRF air conditioning, but also the LED lighting. So they're the two biggest energy burners, but also having, and then after that, having controls on the intelligent lighting.
Yeah, really, really impressive to see how that electricity profile got squashed. That graph you showed earlier, the colourful one, really said it all in terms of before and after, and also the effect of COVID, which is quite useful to see that they turned the building off for a while. That was good energy saving there as well, while everyone was at home. Yeah, a lot of buildings are over ventilated, isn't that right, gentlemen? So getting the airflow rate down to the right level can make a big difference.
Cool. And what health and well-being initiatives have you undertaken at 82 Wyndham Street, which contributed to a high neighbors rating, besides the end of trip facilities?
NABERS doesn't link into health and well-being as much. NABERS is an energy rating tool, a bit like your star rating on your fridge. And what it does is it standardises the buildings so you can compare them. So one's an energy rating. In regard to sustainability and well-being, one of the things we did was we made an end of trip facility that mimicked a hotel room. So we made it a very good, high quality feature. We also made the showers really big. We made the changing rooms, like private changing rooms, large. Then we gave them a big lock area. So it's about 300 square meters of space there. We also had a bike rack area, and it was actually so well used that we've actually built another one just for e-bikes now. So one of the things I'll say is, with well-being, if you make the facilities and you make them to a level that people want to use them, people will start using them more. They'll start walking, they'll start running, and the facilities get used. That's the main thing. You build it, they will come. And that I can't reiterate enough that you have to really talk to your clients and build facilities that they want, but also you need to be able to adapt for those facilities. So when the end of trip was originally built, we didn't have a tower facility. That came in later after consultation with our clients. So we spoke to Panugu, Bothamiscal, and Foster's, and they said, yeah, actually a tower facility would be really good. And that actually encouraged more people to start using them as well. So it's an evolving communication and management type arrangement that you need to have these buildings working.
Cool. And kind of bouncing off of that, can you give any more detail on the actual engineering involved? So why did you not use external shading as opposed to blinds?
On this building here, we had a very short build period. We chose not to go for a resource consent, which is what an exterior shading unit would have done. The other thing is we couldn't put exterior shading on the building because the building is actually part of it has a complicated ownership structure where we own the individual floors, but we don't own the whole building. So trying to deal with two different body corporates, because one body corporate owns the roof, another body corporate owns the basement, we decided it was too hard. So what we did do is we actually tracked down a solar film for the single glazing, which after it applied, it mimicked double glazing. So we chose that as our, ideally external shading would have been the best option, but it wasn't available to us. So we went for mimicking a double glaze facade with the solar film that we put up. And we're also on the boundary of two faces.
Cool. And did the reintroduction of manual blinds then increase energy consumption? Someone asks.
Yeah, no, it didn't actually. Our energy reduction has been better with manual operation of blinds. But the lesson learned is, look, you can have so much automation in a building, but people like to have some control. And it was something we were willing to give up, and it actually hasn't been detrimental to the building.
Cool. And we've already talked about waste a bit, but someone asked, how are you measuring waste from the building? Is this on the Casar Dashboard? Do you want to elaborate on that any further?
We use Green Gorilla for our waste, who provide accurate data for waste removal, and the more waste separation that we introduce at the building, the better data we're finding we get. I think Panugu probably shares that sentiment.
Yeah, the more we can split it up and split our waste streams up. So we've got some going to recycling. We just recently introduced soft plastics now that it's back going in New Zealand, and we do a waste audit as well on just for our tenancy, which helps us identify what's in the wrong place, basically what's still going to landfill that we can separate out through education or better signage or better bins, that kind of thing.
And both Argosy and Eke Panuku's waste removal and data is audited as part of the Toitū carbon reduce and carbon zero certifications.
Yeah. Great. In Papanuku, what percentage of your carbon footprint is air travel, and what are you doing to reduce them?
I have a report on that somewhere. I don't have that right in front of me this second. It's in the bag.
I can probably help with that.
It's not huge because we're predominantly Auckland based. So it has dropped over COVID as well. But I can always find that if someone's interested.
Cool. And yeah, for the person who asked that as well, all of our clients their public disclosure agreements are available on our member directory on our website. So you can always have a little mosey around if you're curious about any of our clients' overall carbon footprints. Sweet. So someone says 64 meters, but how many ICPs?
So we've got one ICP per tenant and one for Argosy. They, in operation, the floors can, technically speaking, be split into two tenancies. So there are two ICPs which could be operational per floor. With regard that question might have something to do with metering as well. We have sub-metering under each ICP, and some of those sub-meters we simply have at zero and identify them as such, so they're not included, that they don't produce any data that goes towards our NABERS rating. Those boards are shut down. At the moment, there might be 6 ICPs.
Yeah, so the idea behind this project was that we allowed for, while we had 1,100 square metre floor plate, we could subdivide each floor into 2. That was the plan for redundancy and flexibility for the future. So it's about having a building that's adaptable, therefore we put the infrastructure in on day one.
Great. And what staff engagement activities were undertaken, and which ones really resonated with the staff and which didn't?
So we've done a lot over the last 5 years we've been in the building. The sustainability champions, our Ngā Tamanaki group, has been going for the last couple of years. We've found that you can quite often pour a lot of heart and soul into green teams that don't necessarily fly. We've found that it's around the expectations of what we're wanting people to gather together and talk about and meet about. So for those keen people, but we don't just focus on one group of people. We actually look at it across the organisation, and so we have regular spots at our CE updates. We have activities running at least once a month, like the lights on bikes and that kind of thing. So making sure that there's a variety of different things. Free giveaways work a treat. You get lots of people coming along to those. But so for Plastic Free July, we've got about 4 different short lunchtime events, so people can turn up in their own time and participate or not. Everything's voluntary. But we find that those types of activities that build a sense of community or that you need to join in a team for, so like the bike challenge, and that's why we're moving towards Future Fit, which is teams based as well. It builds fun and excitement, and we're all on the journey together. You can do, you're one piece of a larger puzzle, so you're not isolated, people don't feel overwhelmed, and definitely not only information based. So not just using your intranet and thinking that that's going to work.
Great. And bouncing off of the bikes as well, incorporating the e-bikes into the fleet, someone asks if that was solely a staff-led initiative or came from the organization, and what were the main barriers around introducing that initiative?
So I wasn't here when that happened, but from my understanding, it was more of like a council-wide, Auckland council-wide, and then the CCOs have picked that up because we're like some CCOs, council-controlled organisations, are distant cousins. We're like a close sister, so we work really closely and share fleet and some of our other core services. Mm-hmm. So that was connected to that, but we still run our own training. So the barriers to uptake for people is unfamiliarity. Not being sure, not knowing actually, is it the same as a bike, all that kind of thing. So we run training. You actually have to have training before you can book the bike. And then I'd say the other thing that we could do some more work on is actually the choice architecture of when you go, I need to go somewhere. So don't just direct people to book a car. it's the hierarchy of what could you do? Could you pick up the hot card? Could you get a fleet bike? You know, it's sort of directing people to make the smartest, best choice for their to get to where they need to be.
Great. And so is that purely available for tenants or set up for visitors as well? And is it complimentary charging? Someone asks.
People bringing, if they come with so someone's coming on the site with a fleet bike, we haven't encountered that very often.
This building has got, I think, 8 visitor bike parks outside.
Out the front, yeah.
Which we only were required to provide 2. So we went above and beyond that to encourage people that are visiting bring their bikes, but we don't have e-bike charging on site.
Yeah, we don't provide
For the
access to the public or meeting visitors, but those bike racks actually are they're really visible, and it's actually really obvious, and they're well used. That's the way things happen.
We also put them under cover as well, just so people would use them.
And don't get wet bums.
Yeah.
Great. And someone says the cost of obtaining survey plans of our office buildings has proven to be prohibitive. We can't on-charge those high costs to tenants. Is there a cost-effective way to go about this?
Survey plans shouldn't be that expensive. Like all building owners, have survey plans for their buildings generally, probably about 90% of them would. If you go to a good surveyor, they can do them. The other thing also is that when people do their fit outs, they have to survey the floor anyway. So there will be survey plans there, it's just hunting them down and putting a process in place when you do your fit out, or the building owner has a fit out that they're there. They're just hard to find. But these days with a laser measure, it's not hard to knock one out for very little cost.
Great.
Just to clarify to everyone, it's occupied floor area for neighbours. So there are particular rules about counting broom cupboards and things like that, which makes it a little bit complicated sometimes.
Yeah, just to add to that, the measure is actually linked to the certified area measurement that the Property Council of New Zealand do, which is the old BOMA measure. So a lot of buildings have them.
Great. Someone says, interested to ask about the 200% above code fresh air decision, and then what the impact of the CO2 control has had in reducing that to provide actual requirements. This has a huge HVAC impact.
Yes, with the reason for the 200% was we're always trying to create a better environment, and fresh air is always linked to productivity and people feeling better. What we found was, yes, when you do put 200% fresh air in, you would have to condition more air. So we put the carbon dioxide control in to balance that. So that's a measure, it's a way of balancing energy efficiency and sustainability at the same time. So we still get good fresh air rates because we make sure the carbon dioxide doesn't go over a certain level, and we can ramp it up to 200. So more people you have in there, the more airflow you can pump into the building.
Basically, there's capability for 200% airflow. The CO2 controls allow that to be ramped down if in one room there are only 2 people.
Supplementary, so obviously the heat recovery system is really important to making sure that's not energy hungry. Would that be right?
Yeah.
Cool. Which runs off to another question. So how do you find a balance between energy conservation and employee comfort?
Look, at the end of the day, buildings have to be comfortable for the occupants. That's the primary factor. The sustainability should work around it, and it's adapted to the client.
We balance it, but I was stretching towards saying we don't balance it. We start with tenant comfort, and then above that we go for energy efficiency and a NABERS rating.
Yeah.
And if that impedes on, or if that comes into the comfort space, then we really have to think harder about that one.
And what we do is we talk to our clients, and it's an informed decision. It's something that both parties agree on.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that I think if there's a why behind what we're doing, it's really important to communicate that to staff, because if there's a particular aspect like the blinds, like why are we doing it that way? Well, if we explain why and it's for a particular reason, then people are a lot more likely to buy into that. And if we need to change it, then
Yeah.
that's the process of doing that.
The other thing I'll add to that is one of the good things about Panuku, Optimus and Foster, so that as our clients, is we talk to them regularly. So we know when there's things not going the way they want it. But the other thing is people with these buildings they also accept that the temperature is not going to be bang on 21 degrees. Like your general house at home doesn't stay at 21 degrees the whole time. And so people are now learning to be more flexible about their workplace and they dress accordingly for their environment that they're in. And I think there has to be a bit of understanding there as well, and that works well.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'd just add to that, it's a case of also picking your battles, not to use too much warlike imagery around something which isn't a combat, but yeah, you don't want to die in a ditch over something which is not going to be massively impactful on your carbon footprint and that potentially you can deal with another way.
Absolutely.
Great. And someone asked to understand a bit more about how you calculated and offset your carbon emissions. Did you purchase offsetting carbon credits?
Our process is obviously with Toitū. There's very little more I can say rather than we count, we quantify. We have that quantification audited by Toitū, and then we make our choice and purchase our credits through Toitū Envirocare.
Yeah, and just coming back to a point raised earlier, because Argosy is already carbon neutral, the additional amount for the carbon neutral certification for the building was actually relatively small. And as Nathan said, that was did you say the last 3 native forest credits available in New Zealand? I'm not sure what happens next year, but okay, that's probably another topic of a different webinar.
Yeah.
We want New Zealand credits. We want to offset within our own area.
Absolutely. And someone said the introduction of electric fleet was discussed. Does the building consider the additional infrastructure for the same and how it will impact the building electricity load?
Yes, the building does.
Yeah. Look, we don't have EV chargers in the building at the moment. And when I say EV chargers, I mean big DC chargers. We're currently going through that exercise at the moment to have a look at that. We got to consult with our local lines company Vector to see what capacity they can give us.
You could tell us this one, Nathan or Satish, the electricity used by those charging stations wouldn't be included in the NABERS rating, is that right?
It forms part of the NABERS rating, yes.
Oh, it does. So if you're charging a lot of vehicles there, then the rating will deteriorate.
Energy consumption, any electricity consumption goes to one of the 3 NABERS ratings: whole build, base build, or tenancy. Any consumption needs to be attributed to something.
Okay.
Great.
Well, that'll be an interesting wrinkle because the benchmarks probably never factored that in to begin with.
And it's something Green Building Council is aware of, and NABERS. They're currently, I think it's under consultation at the moment in Australia.
Cool. And how are you measuring the IAQ of the occupied floor area? Are there sensors for measuring this in real time?
Measuring what? Sorry.
The IAQ?
Indoor air quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't measure the indoor air quality apart from carbon dioxide level. And that's through the BMS that we get that in real-time readings.
Great. All right. Well, maybe time for one more question, then we'll wrap it up.
Cool. Last one, we will say, what is the effect of COVID and increased working from home on occupancy and therefore NABERS ratings?
Sorry, yeah, there's been less people in the office. We have hot desking, which has been set up for a while now, and so I'm not exactly sure on how the office was configured originally, but we've got a staff of 220 odd, and there's not enough seats for everybody if everyone comes in to the office. So it's about balancing your work from home, about requiring people to be in the office, I think, is 3 days a week if you're working full time. So balancing that with the desks available.
Yeah, well, one of the things that happened on this building is most buildings are designed for one person per 10 square metres, according to the building code. This building is actually designed, and services are designed to cope with one person per 8 square metres, so we can have a greater density. So that was a attractive feature for Panuku when they were picking the site, because they knew that they could increase the density later on to a real chicken farm if they needed to, but they've chosen not to.
Yeah, technically speaking, COVID effect on NABERS ratings. A tenancy rating involves occupancy count, so that can have an effect if that survey happens during.
If you did the survey during a lockdown, then there would be consequences for the rating. That hasn't been the case to date.
And can you share those staff travel survey questions someone asks, just as a last follow-up question?
Yeah, I think we can. Yeah.
Great.
Great. Thank you, Kenzie. That was brilliant. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Very insightful. Right, we're nearly on 11 o'clock, so I will now just thank our guest speakers, Danielle, Satish, and Nathan. That was brilliant. Great to have the insight into a cutting-edge building that is actually a refurbished one as well. Obviously gives us some hope for our existing building stock and not just be looking to the brand new shiny buildings. That's great. So next webinar will be on 12th of August. So Thursday morning again, 10 to 11. And the topic is developing a carbon management and reduction program with a focus on the University of Canterbury as a case study. We've got Anthony Sallin and Steve Penny talking about that. And they've got a lot of experience to share. So I'm sure that'll be an excellent talk. So thanks again. This talk was recorded, so you'll be able to share with your colleagues that missed it. That'll be available on the Toitū website quite soon. So farewell and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.